The hum of servers, a gentle rhythmic thrum, was Elara's lullaby, her symphony. For 5 years, Innovision Labs had been more than just an office. It was a sanctuary of innovation, a collective of brilliant minds dedicated to crafting elegant solutions, not just for profit, but for progress. Their flagship product, the Nexus Engine, a sophisticated AI framework designed for ethical data processing, was Elara's brainchild, nurtured from lines of code into a complex, almost sentient entity. She was a principal architect, her days a delicate dance between debugging algorithms and mentoring junior developers, fostering a culture of curiosity and mutual respect that felt genuinely rare in the tech world. Innovision Labs had always prided itself on its unique ethos. Lunch breaks weren't just for eating, they were for lively debates on quantum mechanics or the latest sci-fi novel. Flexible hours weren't a perk, they were a given, trusting employees to deliver their best work when and how they could. The coffee machine was a social hub, not just a caffeine dispenser. Elara thrived in this environment, her empathetic nature finding common ground with colleagues who valued thoughtful discussion over aggressive deadlines and collaborative problem-solving over individual glory. Then came the rumors, like whispers carried on a cold front, chilling the warm atmosphere. Talk of a larger entity, a corporate behemoth named Apex Dynamics, known more for its ruthless efficiency and aggressive market acquisition strategies than for technological breakthroughs, began to circulate. Apex wasn't interested in nurturing, it was interested in consuming, in optimizing, in streamlining. Their reputation preceded them, a shadow cast over the brightly lit offices of innovation. Elara, usually engrossed in the intricate logic of her code, found her focus fractured. Her colleagues, typically radiating an infectious enthusiasm, now wore expressions etched with worry. Discussions shifted from the future of AI to the future of their jobs, their livelihoods, their very way of working. The collective anxiety was palpable, a heavy blanket that settled over Innovision Labs, stifling the creative spark that had once defined it. The official announcement arrived not with fanfare, but with a terse internal memo, followed by an equally blunt press release. Innovision Labs was acquired, effective immediately. Apex Dynamics, through its CEO, lauded the strategic integration and synergistic opportunities. To Elara and her team, it felt less like integration and more like absorption, a smaller, vibrant organism being swallowed whole by a much larger, colder one. The dream of Innovision, it seemed, was over. The initial weeks were a slow, agonizing unraveling. Familiar faces started to disappear, not with farewell parties, but with hushed goodbyes and empty desks. The flexible hours were replaced by mandatory core hours. The collaborative workspaces were reconfigured into more individual, isolated cubicles. The vibrant debates at the coffee machine dwindled into polite, strange silences. The very air of the office felt thinner, colder, stripped of its former warmth and camaraderie. Then came Victor Thorne. His name became a byword for the new regime, spoken in hushed tones, almost a warning. He arrived not with an introduction, but with an agenda, an army of sharp-suited consultants and an unwavering gaze that seemed to pierce through any pretense. Victor was Apex Dynamics personified, efficient, unsmiling, and relentlessly focused on the bottom line. His title was Director of Strategic Restructuring, a corporate euphemism for the executioner. Elara first encountered Victor during one of the compulsory orientation meetings. He stood at the front, his posture rigid, his voice devoid of inflection as he outlined Apex's vision. Maximum output, minimal waste. Every process optimized, every resource allocated strategically. He spoke of metrics, KPIs, and ROI, terms that felt alien and impersonal in the context of their previous work. He looked at people not as individuals, but as components in a vast, complex machine. His initial directives were swift and brutal. Entire departments were dissolved. Projects deemed non-essential were terminated mid-development, their months, sometimes years of work instantly rendered obsolete. The open source initiatives that had been a hallmark of Innovision's community engagement were shuttered. The free-form brainstorming sessions were replaced by rigid agenda-driven meetings, timed to the second. Elara watched, a knot of dread tightening in her stomach, as the soul of her company was systematically dismantled. One afternoon, Victor's presence loomed at the edge of her peripheral vision. He surveyed her team's section of the office, his gaze sharp, analytical. He stopped at a junior developer's desk, scrutinizing the monitor, then the developer's slightly hunched posture. He didn't speak to the developer, but to a consultant by his side. Note the efficiency metric for this station, potential for ergonomic optimization to reduce microbreaks. Elara felt a chill, realizing he saw human beings as systems to be optimized, not individuals to be supported. Elara's own team, the Nexus Engine developers, felt the pressure acutely. Victor's consultants combed through their codebases, not to understand the elegance of the architecture, but to identify redundancies and inefficiencies. They questioned every abstract class, every complex algorithm, every line of code that wasn't immediately transparent in its profit-generating potential. It felt like being stripped bare, her intellectual creations exposed to a cold, utilitarian judgment. She found herself working longer hours, not out of passion, but out of a desperate need to protect her work, her team, from Victor's relentless pruning. She'd meticulously document every decision, every design choice, every subtle nuance of the Nexus Engine, anticipating the inevitable challenge. Her empathy for her team extended to a fierce protectiveness of their shared creation, knowing how much of themselves they had poured into it. One evening, as Elara was one of the last remaining in the office, meticulously commenting a complex section of code, Victor Thorne walked by. He paused at her cubicle, a rare, uneasy silence hanging between them. Elara braced herself for a critique, a dismissal, anything. He simply looked at her screen, at the intricate patterns of her code, then back at her, his expression unreadable. "You're Elara Vance, lead architect for the Nexus Engine," he stated, not asked. "Impressive work." He didn't elaborate, just nodded curtly and continued on, leaving Elara slightly off balance. It wasn't praise, not exactly, but it wasn't condemnation either. A fleeting moment of professional acknowledgement, perhaps, from a man who rarely showed such. The brief, almost imperceptible nod from Victor Thorne lingered in Elara's mind, a tiny, bewildering data point in a sea of corporate indifference. She couldn't decipher it. Was it a recognition of her talent, or merely a confirmation of her utility? The new culture at Apex Dynamics valued utility above all else, seeing individual brilliance as merely a tool, another resource to be efficiently deployed. This stark shift grated against Elara's core belief in the intrinsic value of creative work and the human spirit behind it. The Nexus Engine itself, her pride and joy, became a point of contention. Its ethical framework, designed to prioritize data privacy and user consent, was deemed overly cautious by Apex's standards. Victor's team saw it as an impediment to rapid data acquisition and aggressive market acquisition strategies. They wanted to strip down its safeguards, to make it faster, leaner, more acquisitive. Elara fought back, passionately arguing for the integrity of its design, the very principles that made it revolutionary. Then came the Phoenix Project. It was introduced by Victor Thorne in a company-wide meeting, projected onto a vast screen with sleek, intimidating graphics. The project was ambitious, even by Apex's standards, a global data aggregation system designed to predict market trends with unprecedented accuracy, leveraging vast datasets from across their newly acquired portfolio of companies, including Innovision's Nexus Engine. It was a data kraken, designed to devour and synthesize information at a scale previously unimaginable.
Victor outlined the project's parameters with a chilling precision. Billions of data points, real-time analysis, predictive modeling with a claimed 98% accuracy rate. The potential profits were astronomical. The timeline was aggressive, impossibly so. And then came the kicker. The Nexus Engine, with its sophisticated AI and unparalleled ability to parse complex, unstructured data, was deemed the core processing unit. Elara's creation was to be the engine of Victor's Leviathan.
A collective gasp rippled through the room when Victor announced the team leads. His own right hand, a sharp, data-driven strategist named Marcus, would handle logistics and integration. And then, for the core AI architecture and ethical safeguards integration, Elara Vance. Elara felt a surge of conflicting emotions, pride that her work was recognized as indispensable, but also a deep apprehension about the direction it was being forced into. She was to build the very system she instinctively recoiled from. Their first official meeting for the Phoenix project was tense, an invisible wall erected between Elara and Victor. The conference room was sterile, the air conditioning almost painfully cold. Victor sat opposite her, his gaze unwavering. "Vance," he began, without preamble, "your expertise with Nexus is critical. We need to integrate it with minimal friction and maximum speed. Your particular approach to data ethics will be challenging, but we expect you to align with Apex's strategic objectives." Elara met his gaze, refusing to be intimidated. "My particular approach, Mr. Thorne, is what makes Nexus so powerful. Its integrity is its strength. Compromising its ethical framework will compromise its accuracy and, ultimately, its value." Her voice was steady, despite the tremor in her hands beneath the table. She was ready for battle. Victor simply inclined his head, a gesture that conveyed neither agreement nor disagreement, merely acknowledgement of her statement. "We will find an optimal balance," he responded, his tone flat. "But let me be clear, speed and scalability are paramount. The market will not wait for philosophical debates." He then launched into a detailed breakdown of the project's aggressive milestones, a dizzying array of deadlines that seemed to defy the laws of software development. The project became a daily tug-of-war. Victor pushed for rapid deployment, for simplified interfaces, for the immediate harvesting of any available data. Elara argued for meticulous testing, for robust privacy protocols, for the implementation of user consent mechanisms that were often cumbersome but essential. She saw the risks of unchecked data aggregation. He saw only untapped potential. Their interactions were characterized by a polite but unyielding antagonism. Victor would present a diagram of proposed data flow, depicting a seamless, almost frictionless path for information from source to analysis. Elara would meticulously annotate it with red circles and arrows, highlighting potential vulnerabilities, privacy breaches, and ethical minefields. "This bypasses informed consent," she would state calmly, pointing to a segment. "This opens us to significant legal exposure and erodes user trust." Victor, for his part, rarely raised his voice. He would listen, his eyes unblinking, then counter with cold logic. "The legal department has signed off on a less stringent interpretation. Our market advantage depends on speed. We cannot afford the overhead of individualized consent for every data point." He saw the world in black and white, efficiency versus inefficiency, profit versus loss. Elara saw shades of gray, the human cost, the long-term impact on trust and reputation. One particularly heated discussion revolved around a critical data ingestion module. Victor wanted it to vacuum up all available public data, regardless of its source or intended use. Elara insisted on a strict filtering process, arguing that not all public data was ethical for commercial exploitation. The module she designed was slower, more resource-intensive, but legally sound and morally defensible. "Vance," Victor said, his voice a low hum of frustration, "we are bleeding time and resources on this. Your module is adding weeks to the deployment schedule. This isn't Innovision anymore.
We cannot afford to move at a snail's pace. He slammed his hand lightly on the table, the first overt sign of his growing impatience. Elara didn't flinch. And Apex Dynamics cannot afford a class action lawsuit for misuse of private data, or the catastrophic reputational damage if the system is perceived as a digital panopticon. My module ensures compliance, both legal and ethical. It protects the company in the long run, even if it adds to the short-term schedule. She held his gaze, her conviction unwavering. A tense silence filled the room. Victor stared at her, then at the complex architectural diagrams spread across the table. For a moment, Elara thought she saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Not agreement, but perhaps a reluctant acknowledgement of her point, however inconvenient. He finally sighed, a barely audible exhalation. "Integrate your module," he conceded, his voice clipped, "but I expect you to shave every conceivable millisecond from its processing time. Optimize, Vance, aggressively." The concession was a small victory, a testament to the power of his reasoned arguments and the undeniable expertise she brought to the table. But it was a victory hard won, illustrating the immense chasm between their perspectives. Elara realized then that Victor wasn't inherently malicious. He was simply operating on a different set of principles, a different calculus. He saw the world through the lens of pure, unadulterated efficiency and market dominance. As they continued to work on the Phoenix project, Elara started to observe Victor more closely. Beneath the severe exterior, she noticed a meticulousness that mirrored her own, albeit applied to different ends. He could spot a logical flaw in a business model with the same precision she could pinpoint a bug in a complex algorithm. His understanding of market forces was profound, almost intuitive, something she, engrossed in the purity of code, had never fully appreciated. Conversely, she suspected Victor, despite his outward demeanor, was grudgingly recognizing her unparalleled ability to untangle the Gordian knots of the Nexus Engine. There were moments when his sharp, analytical questions would momentarily falter as she explained a particularly intricate piece of AI logic, a subtle shift in his expression that suggested a flicker of intellectual curiosity or perhaps even awe. He might dismiss ethical concerns, but he could not dismiss technical brilliance. The project was moving, albeit at a pace that felt simultaneously too fast and too slow for Elara. She spent countless hours optimizing her ethical modules, pushing the boundaries of what was possible to maintain integrity while meeting Victor's demands for speed. She found innovative ways to streamline consent processes, to anonymize data at source, to build in layers of protection that were both robust and surprisingly efficient. She was proving that ethics and efficiency weren't always mutually exclusive, a challenge Victor seemed to implicitly present to her every day. One evening, deep into a debugging session, Elara encountered a particularly insidious bug in a legacy Innovision component, something unrelated to Nexus, but critical for the Phoenix project's data pipeline. It was a phantom, causing intermittent data corruption that defied conventional diagnostic tools. Her team was exhausted, stumped. She worked late, trying to trace the elusive error through thousands of lines of archaic code. Victor, unexpectedly, was also in the office, poring over financial projections. He noticed her frustration, the lines of worry etched on her face. He walked over, a rare moment of unprompted interaction. "Problem, Vance?" he asked, his voice softer than usual in the quiet of the late hour. Elara explained the issue, the elusive nature of the bug, her team's inability to pinpoint its source. He leaned over her shoulder, not to dictate, but to observe. He stared at the screen, at the convoluted code, for a long minute. Then he pointed to a seemingly innocuous function call buried deep within a rarely accessed library. That module, he stated, was flagged for deprecation in Q3 of last year by Innovision's own internal audit. It had known memory leak is under high load. Did anyone check the usage logs for that specific component? Elara blanked, astonished. She knew about the deprecation, but her focus had been on Nexus. The idea that Victor Thorne, the hatchet man, knew the specific vulnerabilities of a minor legacy component from Innovision was genuinely shocking. She immediately checked the logs. He was right. The memory leak was subtle, only manifesting under specific high-stress conditions, precisely what the Phoenix Project was about to impose. His seemingly encyclopedic knowledge of corporate minutiae, even within the companies he acquired, was unsettlingly comprehensive.
How did you know that? Elara asked, genuinely curious. Victor shrugged, a slight, almost imperceptible movement. When Apex acquires a company, we acquire everything, all documentation, all internal audits. It's not just about assets, it's about understanding every potential liability, every point of failure. Information is power, Vance. You should know that, as an architect of data systems. He walked away, leaving Elara with a new, complex layer to her understanding of him. He wasn't just a destroyer, he was a master strategist, someone who devoured information to identify weaknesses and strengths. This small incident began to chip away at Elara's preconceived notions of Victor Thorne. He wasn't just a heartless automaton. He was a highly intelligent, intensely disciplined individual with an unparalleled grasp of detail, even if his motivations often seemed devoid of empathy. She realized he hadn't just taken over Innovision, he had studied it, and he expected the same rigorous intellectual honesty from her. The Phoenix Project pushed forward, a relentless march towards its impossible deadline. The data aggregation system was taking shape, a beast of immense complexity. Elara's team, though strained, was delivering exceptional work, primarily due to her leadership and her ability to translate Victor's demanding requirements into actionable, ethical development tasks. She pushed them, but she also protected them, shielding them from the brunt of Victor's relentless pressure. Victor, in turn, began to show a subtle shift in his approach to Elara. His directives were still firm, but they were now often prefaced with a polite, "Vance, I need your assessment on this," rather than an immediate command. He listened more intently to her technical explanations, no longer just for flaws, but for potential opportunities to optimize within her ethical framework. The professional respect, once a grudging concession, was starting to become genuine, albeit unspoken. Then came the crisis. 3 weeks before the final deployment, a critical vulnerability was discovered in a third-party encryption library Apex was relying on for the Phoenix Project's most sensitive data. The vulnerability, if exploited, could expose billions of user records, leading to a catastrophic data breach. The news hit like an earthquake, rattling the entire project team. Victor called an emergency meeting, his face grim, stripped of its usual composure. "This is a full-scale catastrophe," he announced, projecting headlines from tech blogs already starting to report on the vulnerability. "Our reputation, our market cap, our entire future is at stake. We have 3 days to mitigate this. 3 days, or the Phoenix Project is dead, and with it, potentially Apex Dynamics stock value." The engineers, usually so composed, were in a state of panic. Replacing the library was not an option. It was too deeply embedded, too complex to rip out and rebuild in such a short time frame. Patching it was equally difficult. The original developers were unresponsive, their company acquired by a rival. "We're facing a 0-day exploit with no known patch," one engineer stammered. "We're dead in the water." Elara felt a cold dread, but her mind immediately began to race. This wasn't just a bug, it was a systemic failure. She looked at Victor, seeing the stress in his eyes, the almost imperceptible tremor in his hand as he gripped the edge of the conference table. For the first time, she saw him not as an antagonist, but as a leader facing an existential threat. "We can't replace the library," Elara stated, her voice cutting through the rising panic. "But we can encapsulate it. We can build a dynamic, real-time decryption proxy layer around the vulnerable component, one that validates every incoming and outgoing packet. It's a massive undertaking, extremely complex, but it could filter out the exploit patterns before they even reach the vulnerable core." The room fell silent. Marcus, Victor's right hand, looked skeptical. "A proxy layer? In 3 days? Vance, that's building a bulletproof vest in a burning building. It's too complex, too risky."
Other engineers nodded in agreement, their faces showing the immense technical challenge. Victor, however, was staring at Elara's drawing, his brow furrowed in intense concentration. He wasn't looking at the difficulty, but at the logic. Explain the process, step by step, Vance. How precisely would this work to filter the exploit signatures? He pressed, his analytical mind kicking into overdrive. Elara explained, detailing the cryptographic algorithms, the real-time pattern matching, the resource allocation. It was an audacious plan, requiring an intricate understanding of both the exploit and the Nexus Engine's capabilities. It demanded an almost impossible level of precision and speed. It means rewriting significant parts of Nexus's core processing layer to handle the real-time encryption/decryption and validation, she concluded. And it means working around the clock with absolute focus. Victor looked at her, then at the assembled team. "We have no other option," he stated, his voice resonating with a new, urgent authority. "This is our last play. Vance, you lead the technical solution. Marcus, you will marshal all available resources. Food, sleep, personal lives, everything is secondary for the next 72 hours. We will build this, or we will fail spectacularly." The next 3 days were a blur of caffeine, code, and sheer willpower. Elara was everywhere, directing, coding, debugging. She pushed her team to their absolute limits, but she was right there with them, her hands on the keyboard, her mind blazing. Victor, to Elara's surprise, was equally relentless. He didn't just stand back and bark orders, he facilitated. He cleared administrative hurdles, procured additional hardware, ensured a constant supply of food and coffee, and even, at one point, personally coordinated a critical security patch from an external vendor. He watched Elara work, not with his usual critical eye, but with a gaze that seemed to convey a dawning understanding. He saw her empathy for her team, the way she offered encouragement even in the most stressful moments, the way she could distill complex technical challenges into clear, actionable steps. He saw the sheer force of her intellect, applied not just to solving a problem, but to protecting something, the data, the users, the very integrity of the system. During a rare lull, as Elara was reviewing a complex section of code, Victor approached her, a cup of coffee in his hand. He placed it gently on her desk. "Your dedication is remarkable, Vance," he said, his voice surprisingly soft. "I misjudged the depth of your commitment, not just to the code, but to the principles behind it." Elara looked up, her eyes tired but alert. "It's not just about principles, Mr. Thorne," she replied. "It's about consequence. A system without integrity ultimately fails. A company without trust ultimately falls. That's a different kind of efficiency, perhaps, but it's vital." He nodded slowly, absorbing her words. "Indeed," he mused, almost to himself. "I have always focused on the immediate, tangible risks, the market, the competition. Perhaps I underestimated the intangible ones, the erosion of trust, the long-term impact on reputation. These are also liabilities, just harder to quantify on a quarterly report." It was the closest to an admission of a different perspective Elara had ever heard from him. As the 72-hour deadline loomed, the decryption proxy layer was nearing completion. It was a marvel of elegant, robust engineering, a testament to what a dedicated, brilliant team could achieve under immense pressure. Elara felt a surge of pride, not just in her own work, but in the collective effort. Just hours before deployment, a final, rigorous stress test was run. The results flashed green. The proxy layer was functioning perfectly, intercepting and neutralizing the known exploit signatures, protecting the sensitive data without compromising the system's performance. A cheer erupted from the weary engineers, a collective sigh of relief. The Phoenix project was saved. Apex Dynamics was saved. The deployment was successful. The Phoenix project went live, a colossal engine humming with newfound security. Elara, utterly exhausted but profoundly satisfied, felt a sense of accomplishment unlike any she had known. She had not only built something extraordinary, but she had also perhaps shifted the ground beneath a very rigid corporate structure.
In the aftermath, Victor Thorne called Elara into his office. The room, usually a sterile bastion of corporate power, felt different. He gestured to a chair, a first. "Vance," he began, "your performance during the crisis was exemplary. Your technical prowess, your leadership, your ability to integrate ethical considerations into a mission-critical, time-sensitive solution, it was truly outstanding." He paused, his gaze thoughtful. "You saved us from a catastrophic failure. You also demonstrated that robust security and ethical design are not impediments to efficiency, but foundational elements of sustainable success." Elara waited, unsure what to expect. A promotion? A bonus? A dismissal for being too challenging? Victor continued, "I am reevaluating certain aspects of Apex Dynamics' approach to data management, specifically our interpretation of efficiency. I believe your particular approach holds significant long-term value that we have, perhaps, overlooked in our pursuit of rapid expansion." He pushed a file across the desk. "I'm proposing a new division within Apex Dynamics, Ethical AI and Data Integrity. You will head it. Your mandate will be to not only oversee the ethical frameworks for all Apex products, but also to develop new, proactive solutions that embed privacy and security from conception. You will have significant resources and direct reporting line to me." Elara picked up the file, her mind reeling. This was more than she could have ever imagined. It wasn't just a validation of her work, it was a fundamental shift in Apex's corporate strategy, driven by Victor Thorne himself. He wasn't just tolerating her ethics, he was making them central to the company's future. "This is a significant change, Mr. Thorne," Elara managed, her voice thick with emotion. Victor nodded. "The world is changing, Vance. The risks of unchecked data are growing. To remain dominant, we must not only innovate technologically, but ethically. Your vision, tempered by my pragmatism, could make Apex truly unstoppable." He almost smiled, a faint, fleeting upturn of the lips. Elara accepted. She saw it as an opportunity, not just for herself, but for the legacy of Innovision Labs, for the principles she held dear. She would build something new, something that blended the best of both worlds, Apex's ambition and Innovision's integrity. Victor Thorne, the hatchet man, had not just seen her value, he had learned from her, recognizing that true strength lay not just in power, but in principle. The journey had been arduous, but in the crucible of conflict, a new, unexpected partnership had been forged, ready to navigate the complex, evolving landscape of the future. The hum of the servers, Elara realized, now held a different kind of promise, a symphony of both power and purpose.